Hello, my name is Derek Taylor. If you're watching this video, you are taking my Early Modern Europe course, History of Early Modern Europe, HIST 129, this fall at Johnson County Community College. So this is my little introduction to the course. I'm going to go over all the nuts and bolts of the course, what you'll have to do, your assigned readings, your assignments, all that stuff. And so this is the first video. As you'll see, we have lectures in this course. You have to watch more of these videos and see more of my face. But I am your professor for this course. And so let me get started then, going through what you guys are going to do. We're going to take a look at the course, which you'll access through Canvas. Come through it already. I have the course introduction ready yet, but you can see there the syllabus, HIST 129. Let me share that with you. There we go. So you have my name, Derek Taylor. You have my office numbers and everything there, phone, email address. You can contact me via email. I tend to get back pretty quickly to that. I have an office on campus. If you need to meet, we can meet on campus if you like, if you're in the area, or via Zoom. So it's not big of a deal. Just a little about my background, I've taught at Johnson County Community College since 2009. I normally teach Western Civ or American history. This is the first time I'm getting to teach this course at JUCO, and this is actually my wheelhouse. I am actually, by training, a scholar of early modern England, and so early modern Europe is kind of what I have done in my career as a historian. So that you're getting my expertise in this course. Every other course I teach here, basically, I'm sort of learning on the fly, or have learned on the fly. So you are getting someone who's trained in all this. And so just a little introduction to the course, because designed to introduce you to the transition from the societies of Europe, from medieval Europe to those of modern society, 1500 to 1800. And my first lecture, I'll talk more about the whole idea of early modern Europe, but that's the general idea. And you'll be introduced to basically how Europe goes from being a medieval society to one that's on the cusp of what we think of as the modern world. With the eve of the French Revolution, we'll go into that a little bit at the end of this course, and the beginning of what we think of as the modern era most historians do after 1800. I'll emphasize the readings in my lectures, political, religious, and cultural changes that occur in this period that make modernity for us, that begin to set the stage for that later on. Course objectives: on the successful completion of this course, I expect you to be able to demonstrate your ability to prioritize and interpret and synthesize historical material and ideas, and write and otherwise communicate them clearly. I expect you to understand the types of questions that academic historians consider when assessing historical evidence. As you're going to see, most of you probably have the idea about history that I did when I got into history, which is it's basically a story about the past. It's not quite that. It's a little bit different what professional historians do these days. In fact, what we're doing is a little bit different, as you'll see from the textbook, which is it's gonna be a little bit harder to read than maybe you're expecting. 3, describe the major events and developments in the history of early modern Europe. Obviously, if you're supposed to learn stuff in this course, you will. And then 4, understand the importance of early modern history for later developments in European and world history, actually. What happens in this period is that the nations of Europe become, by the end of the period we're talking about here, important, powerful forces in the world, which they have not been, as we'll see, up until this period in the Middle Ages. We're not. So a big change. One of the reasons why one of the reasons I studied early modern England when I got into graduate school was I wanted to know the origins of the modern world. So you go back and you look at these things in this 2 or 3 century time frame, however, wherever you put the date. The dates are a little bit arbitrary, as you'll see. I'll be talking about stuff before and after 1500 actually in my lectures, but still, that's what we're covering here. Required texts, there are basically two, and as it turns out, you don't actually have to buy either of them, I don't think. The main textbook which you'll need is Early Modern Europe, edited by Ewan Cameron, Oxford UP. It's about 20 years old, but it's still a good introduction to the subject. I've ordered copies from the JCC bookstore if you want a hard copy. However, if you click on the link here in the syllabus, this will take you to the Internet Archive, where they actually have a version you can download and borrow. I think it's for a couple weeks, but you can re-borrow it, I guess. So if you want to use that, do that. That's fine. You're also going to be required to get a copy of, and I haven't put one in the bookstore, but it's available also through the Internet Archive, a book called Metaphysical Poetry. It's an anthology of poetry from 17th century England. Yes, you'll be reading poetry in this course. Excuse me. Trust me, it'll be interesting. The way I frame this, it'll be interesting for you. Don't worry if you're got into this thinking, oh God, we're talking about warfare and stuff like that, and now we're doing poetry. Don't worry, we'll just cover some warfare too. Get that sort of thing out of the way. But that's the other thing it'll require you actually to have. And again, as it turns out, you don't have to buy them, hopefully. Grading, you'll be graded on 3 different types of things. You'll have 3 essays to write, 3 shorter essays. 35% of your grade. Final exam, 35%. We'll get to in a moment. And responses, your written responses to a couple of things. Actually, to the poetry you'll have to read as a response, one of those things. So, and that's your grade there. Grading scales standard: 190 for an A, 89, 90 B, and so on and so forth. Now, about those assignments, your final exam will consist of multiple choice questions covering the lectures, textbook in the course, my lectures, and the textbook, and basically demonstrate that you read the book and you listen to my lectures and you can remember stuff. At least find it. Events, figures, ideas. You can use your textbook for this. There's no time limit, but you must complete the exam by the date and the course schedule. I can tell you right now, it's going to be long. It's going to be 100, somewhere between 100 and 150 questions. It's going to be long, and you'll have to know a lot. So that's part of my duty, is make sure you know stuff. You will know stuff when you're done with this course. Responses, you're going to write 2 short written responses, 2 double-spaced pages on the poetry and music of the early modern era. I'll show you this in a moment to go over the assignments. And we'll talk about this, where you can find this stuff on Canvas. Yeah, you can listen to some music as well. I'll show you this from the early modern period. And then finally, those 3 short essays, you're going to write essays over questions regarding the readings and the lectures. And those will be a big part of your grade, and I'll go over those in a second. So, class policies, makeup policies. No makeup examinations or late work will be accepted, except for documented emergencies of grave illness or death in the immediate family. Some sort of major thing. You got COVID, you got in a car wreck, your child is running a deathly ill fever, those sorts of things. Otherwise, you get zeros. Vacation, not an excuse. Work schedule, not an excuse. You have to get your schedule ready before you take this class. It's not my job to adjust to yours. Car, computer troubles. Again, I know it's a computer-based course, but again, it's your responsibility to make sure you have access to that, not mine. None of these kinds of emergencies. If you know you're going to have trouble ahead of time, get to me as soon as possible. Don't wait till the end of the semester. That makes, even if it's totally innocent, that makes professors, skeptical. They think you're just doing that to get out of getting a bad grade. Do it early. They'll appreciate that. I'll definitely appreciate that. Academic honesty policy, you are bound by all sections of the JCCC Student Code of Conduct. This shouldn't be a problem, never has at JCCC, but it's there. I can use it. I won't have to use it. You guys are fine. But you do have the first commandment in this class: thou shalt not plagiarize. And plagiarism, we have a definition here: representing all or part of someone else's work as your own, or copying anything, including wording, no matter how short, from something written by someone else, without citing the source. You guys like to copy and paste stuff. Most of you aren't intending to do this, but you do it because you're lazy and you wait till the last minute, you copy something. You must always attribute something that's not that you didn't come up with yourself, basically. And so again, more specifically there, you must not borrow phraseology even from the textbook without giving credit. You can paraphrase, but you have to put it in your own words. You need to change most of the phrasing. A few words are the same, but common words. And give credit when you're putting on the material. Any instance of plagiarism will result in a failing grade for the assignment and possibility for the course, depending on the nature of the offense. I haven't had to do it much lately. Most of you guys, again, are, you're just getting sloppy is what it is. But don't give me any reason to suspect you, because I will do it. I have done it. Something I take seriously. And finally, if you are in need of accommodations or service, one student has already done this, please contact student services, access services as soon as possible. I'll try to make whatever arrangements are necessary. Definitely will work with you guys, so no problems on that. Course schedule. I know this is an online course. You guys can kind of do some stuff as you please. I'm going to be having things at least set up for you week by week here. You're watching this, it should be the first week. I put the video up there. Early Modern Europe. You read the first part, the prologue to the book. By then, again, you can wait till the last minute if you like, but it's easier if you have a schedule. It's easier for me as a teacher if I have a schedule, a weekly one. So that's why I'm doing this. But you can, you can get ahead of things if you want to do that. You see the schedule of lectures. What we'll have. The second lecture will be on Early Modern Europe, a sort of introduction, broad overview. Then we'll get into the Reformation. I'll have 2 lectures, which I'll release for you on that week, on Desiderius Erasmus and Martin Luther, 2 figures in the Renaissance and Reformation, being of this course, 2 of the major things going on in the early modern Europe. Then a lecture on women in the era of the Reformation and their contribution, how Reformation changed roles of women. And I promised war. We're going to have a lecture on the wars of religion from the fallout of the Reformation. As you'll see, though, the dates there, you do have things due at certain points. The first essay will be due by October the 2nd. And so the first month or so of the course, you'll have to write an essay. I'll get to that in a moment. It'll have to do with wars of religion, by the way, the essay. After that, a lecture on early modern colonialism, a lecture comparing the early empires of England, which is actually not that important for a long time until you get to the latter part of the early modern era, and Spain, which of course is the big one, early part of the 16th century, colonization of South America, Mexico. Then a lecture on the Galileo affair, the trial of Galileo for the Inquisition, what went into that, what that says about the development of science in the early part of in the early modern period, because that's something that feeds into the modern world. So this. And then a lecture on Baroque culture. You probably don't know what that is, Baroque. If you've heard of the term, you maybe heard it's a type of music, which you'll actually listen to some of it in this course. And that week, that's 10/18 that week, but you'll have due that week a response to reading poetry, what's metaphysical poetry, which I'll explain that in a second. So that's one of the assignments. And then next week, you're going to have a couple of lectures. How absolute was absolute monarchy, on the growth of absolute monarchy in this period. That's one of the things you probably associate with the early modern era if you know anything about it. Louis XIV, the Sun King, and so on and so forth. And the social contract, kind of related topic. Then your second essay. And then go into November. Lecture on the Revolution of 1688 in Britain, which is one of the founding. This is a major turning point in the history of Europe. Go through this. I'll give a broader lecture on the history of the press, the printing press in general, printing of books, but also coming of printing and its impact, but also on the development of a news industry in the early 17th and 18th centuries. It's something that'd be, given the prevalence of obviously internet and online media, be an interesting comparison for you guys, because the introduction of the news industry was a controversial thing in the early modern period, kind of similar to the growth of the internet, Twitter, and all that stuff. And then a lecture on something called Jansenism, which I'll have to explain when I get to it, but it's a curious phenomenon. It plays into the next, we'll actually have one more response there to early modern music, which I'll get to in a moment. Then after that, the origins of the French Revolution. We'll talk about some of the background to what feeds into the French Revolution. I won't give a lecture on the revolution itself. Some of your readings will deal with that. So I'll let your textbook deal with that part of it. But I'll talk about some of the things that are in the background. Why France has its revolution. What are the things that are feeding into it? And then probably a wrap-up lecture toward the end of the semester, where I talk about Europe on the cusp of, in our terms, the modern world. We'll discuss this a little bit in the course of my lectures. What is modernity? What does that mean? Is that something that's a permanent condition? Is that something that, is it like a rash and it never goes away? Something like that, because we have to talk about post-modernity, obviously, in the last half century Western life. So, and then your last essay will be due the end of that week, December 4th. And then you'll have your final exam on the 10th. It'll be due by the 10th. Even though you'll take that online, as you'll see. I don't have it finished yet, but it'll be through Canvas. You'll take that as well. One last thing about the syllabus: I always include this in every syllabus I make. I reserve the right to make changes to the syllabus as when circumstances make it necessary. I don't mean I'm going to radically change the course. I don't mean, change the grading scale, add new assignments, none of that stuff. No curveballs, just if I need to tweak something, I can tweak it. If someone discovers a loophole in my syllabus I didn't think about and is trying to get away with something, that's what that's for. I hardly ever do it, but it's there, just so that you are aware of that. So that is the syllabus. Let's go back and take a look at some of the assignments, just to give you guys the rundown of this. Going back, you see the syllabus. You have lectures, which are none there right now, so you won't have any of those yet, but you'll get those. Let me talk about the essays very quickly. The 3 essays. So, essay 1, you saw the outline. You have a lecture on the wars of religion. So you're going to have a paper, a short paper, 3 to 4 pages, double spaced. And what you're going to do for this is you're going to answer this question. This question should be the title of your essay. Right here: was the Reformation the primary cause of the wars of religion? What other factors might account for the intensity of these conflicts, if not religion? And so you'll utilize your textbook, you can utilize my lectures as evidence in your answer. And this is to get you to think through these issues. When you talk about something like this, you have to define your terms, because they can, language can be kind of slippery, especially in the way we use it in everyday life, right? Well, one of the things about academic work in general, but in academic history for the purpose of this course, is we like to define our terms. We're not as sloppy as we are in everyday life. I don't talk like this when I go outside of my work, but in my work, to make clear about what you mean, I want you to define things like, what do you mean by religion? What do you mean by the state? Those sorts of things. Because upon those definitions turns what your answer will be. And so to get you to think through what are the possible causes for these wars of religion, and I'll have a whole lecture on this when we get into it here. So you're asking to assess what's the most important cause, the most primary cause of these wars, in terms of making them so bitter and so intense, and distinguish it from other ones. So it's about causation. It's about you to make distinction between factors and sort of rank them in terms of their importance, basically. And all of your papers will be basically the same thing in terms of format: 3 to 4 spaces, double spaced, 12-point Times New Roman format. Title of your paper should be the prompt. Just put it up there, and then your paper is the answer. Your thesis should be the answer to that question, and it should have an introduction, body, format. Have a thesis statement somewhere that I can identify. If I can't identify it, I'm taking off points. Again, I know students get nervous when they turn in papers. I did this when I was a student. Don't hide the ball from me, if you know the metaphor. You're not going to put it this way. None of you are going to impress me with your learning or your intellectual wizardry, so don't worry about that. I just want you to think through these things. And again, do your best, obviously, but I'm not going to write in the paper. I always had this fear when I turned in essays, like my teacher would write in the margins, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever." I'm not going to do that. Don't worry about that. Think through the problem and show me how you did it. That's all this basically is. Again, in a way that's kind of, you're nitpicking. You're torturing words in order to understand this better. again, you wouldn't think about this stuff in everyday life, so that's just a chance to do it. And finally, if you want to cite the textbook, just cite, I know what textbook you're citing. You just use page numbers, parentheses, or my lecture. You can put the title of it in parentheses. Don't use anything else. Just use the lectures in the textbook. That should be enough. Don't do any outside. I'll probably put that in there and make that clear. You don't need a works cited page. That won't be necessary. Just do that sort of thing. And you have a grading rubric down here. And that's more or less, the comprehension part will be different for each one, but that's basically how you be graded. So many points for following directions in the format, 30 points for knowledge, 30 points for comprehension of the actual topic and what you're doing, and then composition stuff. I'm not going to take off for grammatical mistakes if there's a few of them, but if it affects my ability to read through it, I'll take off points. And that is the first one. We'll go back to this to show you the second one. Will be on October 30th, so a month away. You have plenty of time to do these assignments. This will be about Baroque culture. Was Baroque culture an authentically popular phenomenon? Why or why not? And this is, we're going to go through all this. Baroque is a type of art in the 17th century. And ask the question, is it popular or not? Again, this is where you have to just define terms, popular, and tell me why or why not Baroque does or does not meet your criteria. And again, it's part to get you to think about culture and why it's produced and what it is. Again, same deal in terms of the grading and everything. And that's basically similar stuff. One last one, and then at the end, third essay. Would the French Revolution have happened if the American Revolution had not taken place first? And what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of information about my lectures and the textbook about what fed into the French Revolution, which is, of course, a highly complex event, lots of causes, but I'm going to ask you a counterfact. This is what historians call counterfactuals, the what-if questions. What if what would have been the impact if so-and-so had not happened? And so the question you're going to answer here is, would the French Revolution have taken place if the American Revolution hadn't preceded it? And again, it's to get you to identify other possibilities of what might have happened if what happened hadn't happened. Does that make any sense? You're looking at possibilities, how things might have been differently. That's all you need to know. You can read through this more yourself. And again, it depends on your answer. If your answer is yes, it would have happened anyway, okay, what causes would have made it happen? If no, explain to me why the American Revolution was so important. Why don't you think? Why was it more vital to the French Revolution happening than other causes? And so I think we'll get some pretty interesting answers there. Again, same stuff. Again, the comprehension part of the rubric's different for each essay, but all basically the same. So those are your 3 essay assignments. The responses. Let's talk about responses. Metaphysical poetry. And I'm having you, I'm laughing because I'm not trying to torture you guys. I'm having you read this stuff, by the way, partly to give you a taste of, you usually get political history, you might do some social history in these classes. I want to expose you to early modern culture, partly because why? I love it. I'm a weirdo, so I like early modern things. I do. I love this stuff. I love these things. And because it gives you a taste of what their lives were like as far as we can, to a certain degree. In the 17th century, poetry was still a popular art form and a high art form. And metaphysical poets, as you'll see, we'll talk about some of this later on, and you can actually read through the introduction of the book I assigned, to give you some information about this. But poets from the late 16th to the end of the 17th centuries devised these very brilliant poems that are very difficult to read to a certain degree. They use what they're called intellectual conceits. They use extended rhetorical devices like metaphors and stuff like this, similes that go on for an entire poem to discuss, big intellectual subjects, God, love, friendship, death, in ways that later critics didn't tend to like very much. Especially in the 18th century, they thought this stuff is weird. They use a lot of word games. They love puns. They love stuff like this. They're doing philosophical speculation in their poetry. And sometimes it's not necessarily the easiest thing on the ear. It doesn't sound that great. The lines don't match up perfectly when you read them out loud. And so it's sometimes less than pleasant to be. This is some of my favorite poetry, actually. So I've read this stuff. And so I've assigned, as you'll see in I'll show you the module on Canvas, not all the poems in the book, but just certain selected poems I give you a list of in the module. And this is a link to the Internet Archive. And what I want you to do is choose, it says 3 to 4, choose 4. Choose your 4 favorite poems from this and read the poems aloud. I'm smiling because you're like, why am I doing this? But I want you to get a sense of how they sound, or how we make them sound. Right? We don't know exactly how they sound. We have an idea of how they sounded in the 17th century. It's one of the interesting things about this, where you can kind of speculate about what they sounded like, get a sense of what this is and what they are. And then these response assignments are less rigorous than the essays. I'm going to grade those essays very carefully. These are partly, again, to get you to be thinking about this stuff, get you to exposed to some early modern culture. So these are more, I don't want your opinion in the other papers. I want your closely reasoned essays. These can be more of your opinion. What do you think of this stuff? If you hate it, tell me. That's okay. This is the worst thing. Don't ever, whatever. Just tell me if you don't like it and tell me why. And then particularly, do you agree with the critics of these poets? Because I'll talk about some of this stuff in one of my lectures. This is on Baroque culture, because this is what the Baroque is. You know, broad poems that talk about these philosophical and theological concepts. Is this real poetry? Is it, just to get a sense of what people are doing in this time frame? It's kind of interesting. Directions and format, the grading rubric is much simpler. Follow the format, and then, okay, do you just discuss the poems, their sound, their meaning, does address criticisms of metaphysical poetry? A little easier in terms of how I grade it. It's 50 points rather than 100. And then finally, the other response. This is even more weird. Actually, it's not even weird. A little different assignment. You're going to listen to some clips. I provide you with, as you'll see, with a playlist on YouTube called Early Modern Music. And early music is a term scholars use to refer to the music of the medieval, Renaissance, Baroque eras, roughly up to 1750. After 1750, you get the creation of what I think of as modern orchestral music, you know, Mozart and stuff like that. But early music also refers to the efforts of musicians and scholars from the 60s onwards to recover lost music from earlier periods, quote, before the common practice, canonical music at the concert hall, modern chamber music concert, the current opera house, yada, yada, et cetera, and try to recreate how this is performed. Now, in fact, most scholars are pretty skeptical about being able to recover exactly how this music was performed. We just don't know the exact contours. So it's kind of a thing, again, we can speculate about as students of history here. Or even if there was, you know, one single way to perform this stuff. There's lots of debates we don't need to worry about here, but I love this music a lot. I'm a patron of the Chamber Music Society of Kansas City, so this is something I'm trying to get you interested in if I can. And I've provided you with probably too many clips of music, so when you click onto this, I guess I could show it to you in a second. Listen to some of the clips from me. As you see, I break this down into sections of music. I have a list for you, which I'll show you in a second. You know, pick out, you know, 4 clips of music that you really like. Again, you don't actually have to listen to every single, you know, piece of music that you don't want, but it's to get you exposed to listen to the different types of music. And because it's not like usually 2 hours of music I put up there for you, so you don't have to listen intently to it all. But pick four ones for whatever reason. Pick them from different. As you'll see, I'll show you in a moment, there are different types of music: sacred music, secular dance music, opera, stuff like that. Choose, you know, one from each type if you like. Once you've picked your 4 clips, I give you the author or the name of the piece. Go do some research on it, on those 4 clips, on those 4 pieces of music. You can use Google as a starting point, but you also have more reputable sources available through the JCCC library, one of which I linked to here, the Oxford, that's called Oxford Music Online. As a student at JCCC, you should have access to it. It'll give you a little more, solid background information on music. Don't use Wikipedia or stuff like that if you're doing, but do a little bit of research on the music, and then write a short response to describing your experience of the pieces again, but also what you learned about the music you chose to your research and what role it played, if any, what type of role it played, the type of music in the societies of early modern Europe. What was it, what does type of music do for these people? How different it is, the role of music changes. It's not totally constant from age to age. We all love music, and human beings love music. We love to sing, we like to dance. But just to give you just some sort of comparison of what they listen to, and their listening experience, as is very different. Of course, there's no recordings back then, so it's all live. It's all, it's very different. I'll talk about this a little bit. I haven't done it yet, but I'll post a video along with the playlist to give you a little better introduction to this. So you have some more background anyway, but again, same deal basically. Again, these assignments are not meant to be as strenuous as the essays, but to give you a taste of these things and see what, dip your toe in the waters of early modern culture effectively. The final exam I have not actually created yet, so it's not up there. I'll get that done. And so that is the course. That's what you'll be doing. And so yeah, and so when you get these, again, obviously the schedule's not something you have to follow exactly, but it'll give you an idea anyway what you need to have done by when. Pretty soon I'll have the first lecture up, which is a broad introduction to the period, and so you can watch that as well. Thank you guys for taking the course. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy teaching it. I love this stuff. Hopefully that'll come through in my lectures. This is a delight to me. So hopefully it won't be too painful if you can't stand history or just taking this for credit. I get it. It's all right. I don't care about that at all. But I definitely, this is meaningful to me. So I hope you guys get something out of it beyond getting a good grade for your college degree. So that is all. Thank you guys for watching. You'll be seeing my mug soon. Thank you guys, and hopefully I hear from you soon.